Hi, everyone, and welcome to Season 6, Episode 17 of The Fix. I'm Angel Borrelli. I've invited high school coach Steve Harrow to be my guest to help me kick off my preseason series. Steve is the associate head coach at Morro Bay High School in the Central Coast of California. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for being here again.
Hey, Angel. Happy New Year to you.
Same to you. I love having you here because I've been getting so many emails and questions from high school coaches about some of the dilemmas that you guys face with so many situations. When I was getting all the questions like, what do we do with this? What do we do with that? How do we handle this? I thought, you know what? I'm going to get my expert high school coach on here.
Thank you.
So you can represent the country and you can ask the questions that are burning for you, because I know they're the same questions that are burning for everyone else. And then I also have some questions from other coaches, but I'm so happy that you're here to represent everyone. And hopefully I can come up with some solutions, or at least ways of thinking about the problem, so that you can come up with your own solution.
Great. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here at The Fix. So we've got a new year. We've got a new season. For those of us here on the West Coast, we'll be hitting towards the 1st of February. We'll be having some of our scrimmages begin, and then our first game of the year will be somewhere in the middle of February. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is our pitch counts. One of the things that's very confusing about pitch counts is we all understand them as coaches in season, but could you address the difference, or if there is a difference, between a preseason pitch count as a pitcher hits the mound and gets ready for the season versus an in-season pitch count that's from game to game, appearance to appearance?
That's actually a really great question, because so let's talk about it this way. Let's talk about preseason as you've got a pitcher who's conditioning his arm. Okay. So we're going to assume he's already gone through the flat ground, 45 feet. Then he's gone through 60 feet, changing the volume. So now he's ready to take the mound. Now, what you're doing in this season, the way you want to think about it is that you're conditioning his arm to rotate that many times, in addition to conditioning his legs, conditioning his mental state, conditioning everything. So when you start your pitch counts, and of course, you're always going to follow recovery guidelines. So let's say on the first bullpen, now my guys this season have all been able to start at 25 pitches on their first pen, because they handled their off season with workouts that I designed that actually strengthen them for pitching. And also we had a great flat ground program where I do some creative things. So on their first pens, they were able to throw 25 pitches. So we know that that's going to require a one-day recovery. Okay, so let's say they're throwing the 25. You've got a calendar laid out. He throws it on Monday. Okay, so we know he can get another pen in on Wednesday. And let me just talk about, let's just assume that we've got one pitcher and we're rotating them through. So you can change these days. So on Wednesday, he's going to throw probably a 27, 29, 30 pitch bullpen. He'll tell you when he's done. So now you've got you're still on one-day recovery, and you can choose. And I like my guys to pitch the minute their arm's recovered. I don't like giving them 3-day recoveries for 1-day pitch counts, because it's just like in training in the gym. You kind of lose something. So in the beginning, they may throw more than 1-2 bullpens in a week. But as soon as they're at 39 pitches, they've had 1 day off. And now once you're above 39, you're in the 40s, you're going to have 2 days off. So you just keep climbing up. Now, here's what the difference is. So let's say you're going to go, and this is how it usually goes, 25 to 30. The next one's 35, next one's 39, next one's 44, 45. You're usually doing about a 10% jump. I take my guys all the way to 79. And this was an interesting question that one of the coaches from Michigan had, David. He said, well, I was thinking I should take them to 90. And I said, no, only take them to a total of 79, because beyond 79, that would be pitch number 80. Those are 4-day recoveries. And I don't want a pitcher during his conditioning phase to be taking that many days off. That's cool during season, but not now. So now you've got him conditioned straight up to 79 pitches. Now, what does that mean when, okay, now we're going to have a game? Does that mean he's throwing 25 in a bullpen? Well, do I have to go 79 minus 25? He can only go whatever that number is. No, once he's done the 79 in the preseason bullpens, from then on, the pitch count that you keep is the one he throws on the mound with a hitter. Now, I know it might sound crazy, but the way that the recovery guidelines are set up, when they first came out, I had to make some interpretation of them. And way back in 1995, I did that. And the pitches in the bullpen, you do not count as part of the total pitch count in season. So that's how it's different. So when you get a guy to 79, he's good to go for whatever you need him on in the mound. Let's say you've got a guy entering late and he's only conditioned to 50 pitches. This is a guy that when he reaches 50 on the mound, you've got to pull him. And in fact, if he hasn't been pitching that long, it's scary because you need those pitches in the bullpen as part of the conditioning. So if you've got a guy who, let's say he just entered and he's throwing 30 pitches and you say, oh, well, Angel said now he could throw 30 in a game. No, he's only been pitching for 1 week. So when you go through the normal conditioning, you can go ahead and not count those bullpen pitches. But let's say you're pulling a guy, who hasn't been conditioned because he entered late, then you as the coach have to go, okay, so once they're taking a game mound, we're only counting the pitches that they throw in the game, the one that the scorekeeper's keeping. So, he started last week because he entered late. He's already up to 35. Could I put him in for 2 innings? No, because he hasn't spent enough time on the mound pitching. So in that case, you're still considering him a conditioning type of pitcher. Does that make sense?
It does.
So for the normal pitcher, and let's talk about the normal pitcher because I think we're going to be talking about the late entry pitchers later. So the only thing that changes is you still follow the recovery. You still up them by 10% each time, unless they get to a place where all of a sudden you see their arm fatiguing. Let's say he throws 45. The next time he throws, he stops at 45. He says, coach, I can't do 50. My arm feels tired. You want to make sure you educate these guys that they never want to pitch with a fatigued arm. Then you would say, okay, I'm going to have this guy visit these pitches. And what I do is I do what's called an undulating program. I take my guys up. Once they get to like 49, 54, I drop them back down. I'll give them a 2-day recovery, send them in for 30, give them a 1-day recovery, bring them back out and resume. That way, they're getting more time frequency on the mound. They're increasing their count, but they're also going in and out of the high volume, which is much easier than climbing the ladder and going up and up and up and up. So I go up and down, up and down. And these are all intuitive, probably I could say intuitive decisions based on what I'm seeing. And of course, what I'm seeing with his mechanics. So that the difference in the two is that you're using a pure number and it's an absolute number for your bullpens. But in the game setting, you're not counting the pitches he throws in the bullpens when you're looking at how do we count the total pitches so that you can determine recovery. And, I say to all the coaches, and this happens once in a while, you have to have somebody keeping the pitch counts of each pitcher. And I tell my pitchers, if I ask a pitcher, how many pitches did you throw in the game the other day? And they can't tell me, they're in the doghouse because how do you know when you can pitch again if you don't know how many you threw? And there is no such thing as, I think I threw around 63. No, because if it's 63, you're into a 3-day recovery. If it's 59, it's 2-day recovery. You got to have some organization. So it's really good at the beginning of the season to impart to the pitchers, listen, pitch counts dictate what you can do and when you can do it. And that's also what you'll be doing when you're thinking about rotation and who pitches when and to have those numbers available to you in a calendar where Steve pitched on Tuesday, he threw this many, he's not available till Saturday. John went in for 10 pitches. Oh, he's available the day after tomorrow. And then you all of a sudden, once you do it at the beginning, it's complicated, but it clears up and creates a beautiful organized picture for you.
Yeah, we're very careful about, as a guy comes off the field each inning, there's two of us that are corroborating the pitch count so that the guys know as they're coming off the field. Let me go
Excellent.
back to what you talked about. You do not count the pen warm up as pitches,
In the game, once they're in season,
right?
you stop counting that.
Let me ask you about that. You talk a lot about internal chemistry
Mhm.
and making sure that chemistry in the bullpen is not too hot, not too cold as you're getting ready to take the mound. You want to build up to a certain level. Is it because of it's a different chemistry in the bullpen as you're getting ready to take the mound? It's a little different chemistry, so we don't necessarily have to count those pitches because of that?
Yeah. So like I said, this was open to my so when I got the pitch counts, in fact, it was scary when somebody gave me an interpretation that it said that the day's recovery meant you could pitch in a game 3 days later. It didn't count bullpens. So the numbers, I had to say, well, what do they mean here? So through being a sports scientist, and I was in graduate school at the time, I said, well, this is the way I'm going to kind of interpret this. That they're because it was called game recovery, pitch count, game recovery, something that implied in between games, and I was in my brain saying we're going to call these pitching bouts. So I interpreted it that way and then started working with it. And I can tell you it works because I have longitudinal evidence of 25 years. But here's the deal about the chemistry. One, that was the reasoning that I used in order to make this distinction. Two, if you have to start counting every pitch, and that's part of it, including then you would have to include the warm up pitches when there's no hitter. Now you're going to be in a mess of how do you count it? Okay. And we're dealing with numbers. So I had to quantify this thing and also streamline it. Now, about the chemistry, you don't ever have to tell a pitcher about his chemistry in a bullpen. Number one, the pitcher's body is always regulating his own chemistry. Two, he doesn't have the same chemistry if there's not a guy at the plate. Okay. So the thinking that I used, yes, less intensity, free mind, just going for it. And now you count in the game. So one was for I needed to bring this into a defined way of dealing with this information I had in front of me. USA Baseball, this many days recovery. I had to learn to interpret it. So now, if I'm working with a pitcher and he's pitching in 2 days, he's going to throw no more than 59 pitches. He's got 2 days recovery after his appointment with me. So I'm counting every pitch in that bullpen because that's a bullpen. It's what he's pitching for that day. When he goes into his game, you do not count those warm up pitches. You count the game pitches. And if he threw 79 pitches, calls me up and says, when can I come and see you again? How many pitches did you throw in the game? 79. I go, you got to have 3 days recovery. I'll see you on the fourth day.
There you go.
See how that works? And
Yes, I do.
yes, that's a great question.
Great, good. Well, that kind of sends me or pivots into our next question that I have. I've got a couple of other sports pitchers that will be joining us late in the season. So these are the guys that are entering late in the season. And, obviously they're on mixed pathways when it comes to physiology and all that. I think we talked about that in an earlier podcast, but maybe you could talk about as the pitch counts and gearing up for a season, how you would handle these late entering season pitchers.
So, first of all, about the physiology, and I'm so glad you remembered that. There's nothing you can do about the changes that go on inside the body of somebody who's been playing basketball or somebody who decided to become a long distance runner. And that pitcher himself, his physiology and whatever he does as a pitcher will be a product of whatever he's got going on in the inside. And now he's going to be in another training cycle, and hopefully some conversion will take place, but it's really nothing you can worry about. It's actually an issue you want to think about, or a pitcher wants to think about before he goes into another sport. Once you go to another sport, you have to understand, okay, I'm going to be risking injury. I'm going to be training the inside of my muscles to be endurance or anaerobic. Nope, I'm going to do it anyway. So once it's said and done, it's said and done. So there's nothing you can do about that. Okay. It may explain some things to you. If you see your pitcher dragging butt for the first month, you might go, man, he's out of shape for this, especially if he was an endurance athlete, like running cross country or something. So there's nothing you can do about that. Now, the other thing is this: you cannot rush the preparation of the arm, particularly in the first weeks. If you're going to take some latitude or be more aggressive, and it's how I am, my nature with the personality of my throwing programs, whether it's preseason or coming off of an injury, although it may be different for injury, is to be nice and smooth and conservative, with frequency on the mound being more important than volume right away. And if I've done that for 2 weeks, getting them up to 39 in a frequency plan rather than a high volume plan, then I feel the rope to be a little more aggressive on the next phase, where they're not repeating the same pitch count, where they're going up, maybe adding 5 or 6 pitches at a time. And then I might have to level that out. But the beginning phase is everything, particularly with your late guys, because they've been playing sports. There's no sport that has a pitcher. Remember, a pitcher's doing one motion, and we're only going to talk about him as a pitcher, not any of the other things, because I don't know much about that. But pitching, think about it, they're doing the same thing all the time. There is no other sport where he's doing the same thing all the time. So he's getting banged up. Okay. So the first weeks are for him to figure out, where is my body when it comes to pitching. So you can't rush the calendar. So you have to accept that if he's a starter, he cannot be somebody you can rely on. And you have to kind of lay out the calendar and see, where actually is he going to land if we did a conservative calendar. You kind of get a sense of, and you might lay it out and go, geez, he won't be ready till June. Well, that wouldn't be the case, but you still lay it out. Then the second concept that I want everyone to get is, the pitcher's got to condition his arm, and he has to face some live hitting. Okay. So you're thinking in a dual role. Now, the third concept is, a pitcher shouldn't be under the stress. And this is not the same for closers, but I know in high school, sometimes the roles are mixed. So you don't really have a guy who's just a closer. But until a pitcher is up to 40 pitches in a bullpen, and by the way, remember, we're conditioning. So 25 of those, if let's say he's a closer, 40 would still be the number. 25 pitches warm up in a bullpen, 15 in an inning, 40 pitches, cool. You could get your pitcher who's a closer, or any pitcher. So 40, to me, once they get in the 40s, you can have them face safe live hitting, or, because it's difficult in season, you put the little guy there, standing there, the what you call it guy, or you
The
have one of your
cutout.
yeah,
Yeah,
you
we
have
call it
one
the
of your
cutout.
yes, you have one of your players stand in.
Yeah, we run our guys in there to see pitches too, so it's a dual
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
and it's a great cool thing. But listen, the live guy who is not moving is more stressful for a pitcher than the guy who's swinging. And I noticed this, and I started questioning my guys, because I always have this as part of, once my pitchers are into 40, 50, not so much if they're going through a normal preseason, but if, the season's up upon their back, they're starting late, whatever, I'll make sure they have that stress, because I don't want them to have surprises in a game. I'd rather, if their changeup isn't working this season, I want them to know. If they can't locate it, I want them to know. If they can't pitch to a righty or a lefty, I want them to know. So my job when I'm working with them is to do a lot of things with their motion, but to also create the environment that starts to simulate, not just so much they get practice of the skills that are required, but they have to know who they are. And the latecomers are coming in as a different guy than they left on the last season, because they're changed. Every time you play a sport, it changes you on some level. It could be body weight. Like, I've got one of my catchers is a wrestler. So he's lost tons of weight. Now, I don't have to worry about that because he's not a pitcher, but that's still, his coach has to worry about that.
Hmm.
Is he wrung out right now? How wrung out is he because he weighs less? So you can't rush it. He's still got to face some hitting, standing in, something that gets him ready, hopefully a scrimmage, advance him to that before you can put him in. The other thing is, once he's pitching, the late guys, pay close attention to them. And if you see them performing really well at 40 pitches, and again, 40 is a great number, and you can get them there after they're flat ground in a fairly short amount of time, like 2 weeks. See if you think there's somebody that you could use for one inning once they've already faced hitters or done something. So you can start to interweave them that way, but they may not be ready to do that. And that would be one of the things you would want to look at. So remember, you can use them in a different way, volume wise. And here's the guy that we will dispel that rule of you only count game pitches, because you're just using a guy who's still getting conditioned. So now, if he's conditioned to 40 and he throws 25 in a bullpen, here's your test question. How many can he throw for you in a game?
15.
Right, because he's not the other guy who already conditioned to 79. Now, the next concept, when they're conditioned to a number, he's conditioned to 40 on, let's say, Monday, and you put him in a scrimmage on Thursday, he can actually throw 44, 45, 46, because now that becomes another conditioning session as well.
So he's lengthening that 40 that he's already got to that
Yes, because
plateau.
he is
Yeah.
pitching, but he's not someone. So here's the deal. He can go a little more than what he's conditioned for, but remember, he's not the guy who has been throwing consistently up to 79 for the last 6 weeks. So that's when you have to bounce back and think of the overall condition of the arm. I know it sounds confusing, but it's actually simple if you have a minute to think about it. And once you are on the field and you have an actual human in front of you, you go, okay, this guy, he's done this, he's at 60, okay, we're going to do this, and oh, here's this guy, and oh, okay, and all of a sudden it will materialize for you, and from here on out, it'll never be a problem again.
Makes sense. And like you say, you give us coaches a lot of credit in that, we'll see things and say, okay, wait a minute, this guy definitely needs to stay at a 40 level for now, because I'm seeing something, a dragging, or it's being tired or something like that. So some of those intangibles that we coaches pick up on definitely helps.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So what next question do you have for me? I think something about you want to get some ideas for how do you rotate through a 3-day or 4-day tournament, I think you mentioned, right?
Yeah. So at the high school prep level, I cannot think of a team that will not have some kind of a spring break tournament. We all do. And within that spring break tournament, you're looking at back to back to back days. For us, we're going to have at least 4 games over 4 days. There'll be single day games. But, you get to that 4th day, depending on how you do, you might have a 5th, possibly even a 6th game on that 4th day. So I was wondering if maybe you could talk about how to effectively handle a staff as you get into a spring tournament, multi games over a few days, and how you would attack that, how you would go about it.
Okay. Well, so this is something I had to deal with when I first started working with youth pitchers. I don't know if you know their schedule.
Yes.
They're playing 3 games a day for 4 days in a row. I mean, it is insane what they do with 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's crazy. So one of the coaches loved my work, and we sat down, and he said, Angel, what am I going to do? I've got this tournament coming up. So I gave him a bunch of creative ideas, and he called me after. He said, oh my God, it was so great. He said, but boy, the other teams were looking at us like, you're rotating your pitchers so much. But, he wanted to be able to get through it. So we don't have to work that hard with guys that are older. You can make this work. Here's one suggestion. Now, coaches, you know that saying, out of the mouth of somebody innocent comes sometimes great ideas. I'm not a coach. I don't coach for a team. I don't deal with baseball strategy on a daily basis, but I do understand the pitch count and recovery rule system because I have to work with that. I'm an expert at that. I'm a bullpen expert. So I'm going to suggest things to hopefully stimulate your creativity, and then you can take the ball and run with it. Now, if I have 4 days And we know you've got a number 1 pitcher, a number 2 pitcher, a number 3 pitcher, number 4 pitcher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know that, first of all, you got to get out of the gate and you got to win day number 1.
Very important.
We also know if you make it to game 4, you got to win game 4.
Mm-hmm.
This puts the pressure on game 3 because it's the last game that's guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
So I would take my 2 best pitchers and make sure that I'm covered for game 1, game 3, and game 4 with my number 1 and number 2 pitcher.
Okay.
And then I'm going to leave it to you to fill in day 2, which would probably be your number 3 pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Now, doesn't that sound intriguing?
Yeah, expand on
Aren't
that.
you dying to know how I'm going to do this?
Yes, please.
Okay, so
That's good.
Stay with me on this. Hey, and coaches, any of you, if you're driving, please pull over while you're making notes. Secondly,
Safety first.
You can always email me. So first of all, I have in my head, it's memorized. If a pitcher goes over 59 pitches, meaning he hits pitch number 60, he's on a 3-day recovery. We do not want that for somebody we want to use twice. And you've got your 2 best pitchers. You want to use them twice, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to evaluate the possibility of you're doing something like this. The first part of the game, you send in number 1 pitcher. He does not go over 59. He has a 2-day recovery. He's able to go game 4 with as many pitches as you want.
Got it.
When you pull that guy at 59, and I want to remember, if I don't say this, remind me to tell you about how pitchers are when they know their number. They act really well. They get the job done. At 59, which is going to be about 4.5 innings for a good pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And trust me, when they know their number, they bring it. When you pull him, you put in your second pitcher for 39 pitches. Okay. Because that's going to be possibly 3 innings plus. So if you've got 4.5 at the first, you're playing 7-inning games, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. So you've got 7 innings potentially covered with pitcher 1 doing 59, pitcher 2 doing 39. And hey, if you've got a hot closer and you don't make it to the end of the game, put in your closer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the pitcher that's thrown 59, he needs day 2 and 3 off. You put him in on day 4 for as many as you want. The pitcher that threw 39, he's the cleanup guy for pitcher number 1. So now you're using pitcher number 2 as middle relief, maybe closer as well. He takes the 1 day off on the second game. He's in on the third game for as many pitches as you want.
Right.
So now all you've got to fill in is possibly a third pitcher on day 1 who's a hot pitcher. Your first 2 guys will probably get the job done, and I'll explain that in a second. Day 2 is your only worry. Okay? But by laying out this and then putting names in place for the positions I just said, so pitcher 1's going to pitch day 1 and day 4. Pitcher 2 is going to pitch day 1 and day 3. Day 1 probably will not need cleanup. Number 2 is your only situation to deal with, and I know you'll be able to, but you leave the first and second guy alone, and now you're good. Okay, now here's what I learned. So because of this pitch count rule, and I'm such a fanatic about it, and a lot of my clients in high school were signed, and, when they were freshmen and sophomores, when they got into being a junior and a senior, and they were playing, and the high schools that they attended were doing so well because they were such great pitchers. They were playing a lot of high school games, championship games, and they were also on travel teams because they were playing the perfect game, Under Armour, etc. But also 2 or 3 of them were draft potentials out of high school. So the coaches were scared to do anything. And they, by the way, made sure that they followed the pitch count rules. And most of them were starters. So it was no problem. They could go, 100 pitches. And they were going 100 pitches, uninjured and pitching well. So they were calling me. They were calling me saying, Angel, how many pitches can he throw today? I have to have him for game 4. And they were calling me for advice because they were concerned about having anything happen. And I have greatest respect for them, although I knew they already kind of knew the answer, but they were just calling for some consult. So we were sending pitchers into a game. And my one pitcher, I remember one time I said, you cannot go over. And the pitch count days change. Once you hit 40, so up to 39, it's 1 day off. 40 to 59 is 2 days off. And 60 to 79 is 3 days. And after that, it's 4 days. They would give them a number and say, you got to get the job done in 39 pitches. Or they said, we want to put him in for the last 3 innings. How many pitches can he throw? We would give them the number and say, you can only go to 59 today because they want to use you on the 3rd day. Or they want to use you on the 4th day. Those pitchers would go in and get their job done in that many pitches. It was really something to watch. And I thought, how interesting is this? So when a closer is a closer, think about this. He goes in, closer's mentality is so different, right?
Right.
And they're going in the 9th inning. Aroldis Chapman knows exactly how many pitches he can throw. He knows how many pitches he wants to throw. And he also knows he's got to get the job done. In other words, you've boxed him in.
Mm-hmm.
Closers are boxed in. They're very good at being boxed in. Middle relief guys, talking about the major leagues, the guys who are setup pitchers, they are boxed in as well. They also have things they can and can't do because they can't blow it for the closer. They perform very well. Something happens when you take an athlete and you box them in. It's just like the guys, when we call guys clutch, it's because they just seem to, in the moment, do exactly what they need to do. So you're telling your pitcher number one, hey, listen, we want you on game number 4. So you've got to 59 pitches. Get the job done any way you can, but get it done. And then we're putting in so-and-so. He's going to finish it out for you. And hey, you're being pulled at 39. You tell him ahead of time.
So that, in essence, you're boxing them in.
Boxing them in. And guess what? You're going to see 12 pitch innings.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying right there is that they see the finish line. They know that there's a definite finish line, and I'm gonna get myself 100% to that finish line because I know after that I'm done. Which that gets into the whole psychology of it.
It's a task. Now, for all you coaches out there shaking your head, just think about it this way: we see different rotations in the World Series. We see different rotations in the playoff games. That's because in games like that, which would be your 4-day straight in a row tournaments versus your 2-day a week games, your goal to win is the same, but the journey there is very different. So you have to start thinking about it in a different way. And that's what I was saying when you ask someone like me to do it, when I don't have the half the knowledge you guys do about how do you rotate, who do you put in, you've got to face this hitter and that and the team. When you just look at it from the arm potential. So when you asked me this question and I laid this answer out, it's because I'm thinking of the pitcher, his arm, and performance. Guys, always remember this. The tendency to want to use a guy when he's not recovered, you are looking at only one half of the picture. You're looking at who's my best guy, who's clutch. Okay, I can put him in. But if you don't see the other half, but that guy I'm seeing, he's not that guy. He is only a partial version of that guy. So when you put him in 2 days in a row because you absolutely need him, the chances are, particularly at this level, you're not putting in the guy you think you are. You're putting in a half-tired guy. So it's a lot to process, but when you are in a 4-day tournament, your goal is using the best guy in the best place and getting their performance out of them. The worst thing is to make mistakes with your rotation, and then all your guys are wasted. And let's say you make it to the 4th game. So, and of course, we know that these rules are broken. We've seen in the major leagues where they bring the starter in as a closer and do this and that. Well, the times we've seen when we've all gone, oh, no way, this guy's arm is fatigued. He did blow it. Sometimes we go, "Oh my god, I can't believe they're putting him in." And it was great. So, it varies, but you wanna think it through, and then you guys with your brains make the right decision, but there's a way to do it if you do it ahead of time. So you and then, of course, if something happens, a pitcher gets hit or, somebody gets pulled, then you have to make your quick decision, but this is just a concept that can teach you how to lay things out, and if you can master this, you can master the bullpen game situation that you're in during the season, which is how do you get your bullpens done? How do I organize my bullpen calendar so all my pitchers are on a system and organized, which is so critical. So how does this plan sound?
Sounds great. It sounds like what you're saying is we need to map out, which we do pretty much in a way as coaches do as we look out across the season. But yeah, those 4 intensive days of mapping out, boxing in, and also expect when they're going to be used again. And so they can plan for that.
Yeah. So with this being said, so when you're thinking about your pitchers, and this is the season where you guys are looking at all your pitchers, you're kind of putting numbers on him. He's our number 8 guy, he's our number 9 guy, or oh my, I don't know what. He throws heat, but he's all over the place. You're starting to assign labels to your pitchers. Pick out before this tournament, pick out a few pitchers and see if how they perform if you make them act like a closer. So, for example, I'm a fan, of course, again, bullpens are what I do. That's all I do. That's my game. So, when my pitchers are in there and once they get to 40 pitches, I'm always working with video and the motion, but I set up the environment. So I'm always setting it up like I'll tell the pitcher and I'll talk to the catcher. I'll say, I want you to set up inside. I want you to set up outside. Some cases I might say, give him an early glove in this position. He's having trouble. And this is all feedback coming from the pitcher to me and also the catcher. So I'm taking that and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. I want you to give, you call the pitches. No, you tell him what you're throwing, but let's work in balls and strikes. We start to frame it. And also, I say, how many pitches do you want to throw in an inning? And they'll say, my best pitchers will say 12. And my other pitchers will say, well, give me 15. So every 12 or every 15 pitches, we take a break. So they'll throw their 25. Most of my guys throw 25 warm up pitches. And then they come down, we look at video. Then they go back up, they throw another 15. That's how we do big, long pitch counts. Now, if I've got a guy who's a closer, actually, it's funny. I don't work with many guys that are closers. I used to, but everybody, it seems, is a starter these days that I work with. But let's say you've got someone on your team, and let's say you're going to this 4-day tournament, and let's say you go, you know what? I love that first day rotating 1 and 2. But what if we need a guy to come in and clean it up? Who could we count on, or maybe we need him to go in the middle for 1 inning, and then we put our number 2 pitcher in to finish off the game. Well, who can we get that could throw 1 inning and just maybe be good enough to where he doesn't do us damage, but maybe even advance us? So you look at your rotation. You don't want it to be your good guys. So you go, okay. So you throw someone in and say, okay, I want you to do a 40 pitch bullpen today. I want you to warm up at 25. Then we're going to call balls and strikes. I want you to get this inning under control. And you say 15 pitches, give me a good inning. And you have the catcher calling balls and strikes, and have some pitchers that you do this with so you can see and go, you know what? I think he could help us out if we needed him here. And if he practices that enough, he will start to frame himself in and he'll be there for you. So do planning way ahead of time so you start to get the guys to work in the pens in a way that you might want to use them. In other words, design your rotation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that middle guy, we might sneak a guy in the middle between number 1 and 2 because we're coming up against, say, the 7, 8, 9 hitters. And so
Right.
there
See,
might be a
that's
guy that's perfect for that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. And see, those are the details that I forget about. But yes, you're absolutely right. Where are they at in the hitting order? So yeah. Oh yeah. And actually, that's genius. So you put the best at the beginning and end. Excellent. That's actually fine tuning this plan. So for any coaches out there that need a further explanation on this, when you've got a pencil and paper in your hand, feel free to email me and we can go over it again. But yeah, so awesome. And this is kind of a cool segue because Steve, one of my other coaches, Brent, who is in Peoria, Illinois, a high school coach, he has an interesting thing. I mean, can you believe that the coaches that have been writing in, they are actually indoors? They're not even practicing yet
Yeah,
because
we're spoiled out here on the West Coast. For
yes,
sure.
they're and when they tell me, and they're not even getting their first practice till March 2nd. And the first game's March 17th. Are we lucky or what?
We are.
So anyway, he's got bullpens. So I had to ask him a few questions. So he says, we're indoors 2 days a week. How do I get my guys to be conditioned? So my first question is, what days of the week are they? And they happen to be Tuesday, Saturday. That's a great schedule. Okay, Tuesday, Saturday. I was praying it wasn't like, well, actually, it works out kind of the same, but I was praying it wasn't 2 back-to-back days. I said, and what have you managed to get your pitchers to right now? Because he's saying, how do I get them ready for the beginning of March, for the first practice? I said, well, what are you up to right now? And he said, 45 pitches. So I looked at a calendar, and so I want to give you the concepts of how I laid this out. Guys, you have to print out calendars. Don't do it on your phone. Lay it out big. I'm a
Yeah,
calendar
I
person.
agree.
Oh my God. I have calendars that are table size because I do this all day long for my pitchers. I have to do it for every one of them. So let's just assume. So we're in January, and I'm just assuming that this Saturday, the 25th, he said they're at 45 pitches. So I'm just going to pretend Saturday is their 45 day. So I looked at this and I go, okay, well, what do we have? So the first thing you do when you're laying out, let's say you're deciding, when am I going to do my bullpens, which can also, in this case, this day here, it's actually a game. How do I lay out my bullpens, or how do I think about organizing it? So the first thing I did is I counted how many recovery days are available after Tuesday and how many recovery days are available after Saturday. Do you understand that?
Yes, I
So
do.
you've got to figure out when you're going to be doing what. So we've got a Tuesday with a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday recovery, and we have a Saturday with a Sunday, Monday recovery. So here's what we know. Saturday has to be 59 pitches max for anybody. And remember, I said, don't take them over 79 in your preparation bullpens. That's plenty. Okay. So Tuesday becomes the volume increasing day. You're still increasing the volume on Saturday until they get to 59, and they're almost there. So once he hits like a week or two from now, he's going to be at 59. So now you've got pitchers throwing high volume on Tuesday, 59 on Saturday. Beautiful. Now you've got what I call the undulating format. You're going up and down, up and down. And when you have your max for the day on Saturday, that doesn't have to be 59. You say, hey, you can go to 59 today. What do you want to go to? Trust your pitchers. In fact, I always say, hey, we're on board for like a 35, but you let me know. You did 30 the last time. I want you to do the same unless you can't. And then once you get to 30, I'm going to talk to you. And I'll say at 30, how many you want to do? And it's funny. This isn't a give me a round number situation. Some will go 2 more, 3 more.
Yeah, we get that.
Yes,
Sure.
they're very specific because we who are not pitching, we're looking at the numbers and we think 5's not a lot, 4's not a lot. But guess what? When you're throwing pitches, it can be as small as 1 more. So you have the number and then you check with them. But Saturday could never be more than 59. And Brent, this is simple. Tuesday's your volume day, and I laid it out myself. And by February 25th, you should be at 79 pitches, no problem. And remember, when you're increasing by about 10%, give or take. But you lay it out on a calendar so you have some idea. So I just laid it out with 45 on the Saturday, and then I went like 49 to 51 on the Tuesday, and I just kept going, upping it by 3, 4, and you're at 79 pitches by 25th of February. And that's great. And so this would be for somebody who right now is at 45. So Steve, if you've got guys coming in late, you can possibly use something like this as well. But remember, in the first weeks of a throwing program, I get my guys on the mound. In fact, I have a guy who threw his first pen on Sunday, and he went all the way to 30. I gave him 2 days off to check in to make sure he didn't get sore from that, and he didn't. And then I had him in the gym on Sunday and Monday. Tuesday off completely. And now to make sure that he's good, I have him pitching Wednesday, Friday today, Sunday again. That's 3 bullpens. Obviously, I'm not going above 39 today. I didn't go over 39 on Wednesday because he's pitching 39 again on Friday because each of those have 1 day recovery. And on Sunday, he'll probably go 40, 45, 46. So I am pounding him with frequency because this is his first week on the mound. I want him to feel his own pitching motion, feel everything that's happening. And also he's working in his other pitches and he's figuring out what do I need to work on. And it's a great baseline to see what can he handle and what can't he handle. So when you're bringing your guys in, don't be afraid to do that. And I also just had a pitcher in for 3 days. And after getting feedback from him and also working it correctly, we did 15 pitches every day, 3 days in a row. USA says you can throw up to 25 or 29 with no recovery. I don't believe that because when I experimented, every pitcher I ever talked to and every pitcher I've ever had do a small pen the day before they had an appearance, they never went over 19. This pitcher told me 15 is the perfect number. And I have thought that. So if you've got a guy who you, for some reason, you got to fit it in, they can do 15 pitches 2 days in a row.
Okay.
Okay. So that would be the max, though. And try not to do that, but in a pinch. So what do you think about that layout?
Good stuff. Definitely good stuff.
I hope Brent likes it. That's
I'm
the
sure he
thing,
will.
Brent. If you don't like it, call me up, and there's always a plan B somewhere in there. So anyway, back to you, Steve. So what do we have next on the lineup?
Well, there's some training myths and truths out there. And one that hits home with me, especially as we're at this time of year, is running the foul poles. Long distance running for our pitchers. Good, bad, myth, truth? What do you think?
Well, I wish someone could answer this question for me because I have a pitcher who's in the minor league system and they run. I found out what they do to run. And of course, in the off season, I'm matching it, but doing it the right way in the sense of just in case they weren't structuring it correctly so that he'd be able to handle it when he got back. But I asked him, so what's the distance? First of all, I can't tell you how complicated it was for me to learn what are foul poles. I'm looking at the light poles. So,
Yeah.
and I said, I never even noticed those poles there. So anyway, he ran yesterday from the left outfield, the foul pole, and then he ran 3/4 of the way to the foul pole that was on the first baseline. Oh, I get it. It's on the third baseline and the first baseline. Okay, duh.
There you go. Foul pole.
That's so funny. I get it. It's on the oh my
Out on the
gosh.
warning
I
track.
can't tell you how this just cleared things up for
Sure.
me.
Yep.
Anyway, so what is that distance?
Oh gosh.
If you're running it along the fence.
If you're out on
what's
the
the
warning
distance?
track, I'm going to guess it's probably about 100 yards, maybe. 300
Yes, he
feet.
told me it was about 100. So what we did is we went on the track and we were running foul pole to foul pole.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he ran it on the field, he said, I think it might be about 120. So here's what we know. And so I timed him and I've timed tons of pitchers. I like my pitchers running hundreds, which is going to be about a 20-second run. It can be even faster. I mean, when I was working with younger high school guys, they were doing it in 15, 16 seconds. But anyway, 20 seconds is the magic number for how much you don't want them to go too much further than that on any one activity like running. But it can be 25 seconds. You just don't want it to start getting into 30, 35, 40. Then they're losing that boundary we talk about. You got to box them in because it's not just an external thing. At 20 seconds, they'll start developing lactic acid and they're going to feel it. At 20, 25, 30 seconds. If they do too many of them, they're going to feel it. The deal with running is the recovery. It's not the running. Just like it's not the pitch count. If a pitcher can go 110 pitches, leave him in, but give him the recovery for that. Don't have him do a bullpen the next day. So let's consider it hundreds. So if you're out on a track running for conditioning, it'd be goal pole to goal pole. So anyway, that is okay. The deal is not running without getting the recovery. Unfortunately, coaches go, run it all the way, walk just a little bit, and then start running again. No, you don't even give them a time. Okay, some coaches go, run poles, take 20 seconds, and then run back. No, what I did when I was training a whole team of pitchers, run to this place, stay there until you completely recover your breath. And within maybe a minute, one guy would start running, then another guy, and they would be in groups, but they didn't run until they were recovered. Now, what does that do? It gives you the ability to put out 100% effort with each bout. If you're not training at 100% effort on short distances, you might as well stay home. You've got to be able to put out. Then you also monitor how many repeats you're doing. So yesterday we did 6 of them and he was done. And he was done. So the running, it's not the running. So hundreds, 60s are great. Okay. And then, so the distance from the mound to first base, they have to cover that. So I like them doing that distance. So 40s for speed, hundreds for blowing out that energy pathway, and then any distance that's specific for what that pitcher does. And, pitchers have to be able to get to first quickly, and they have to be able to get to first from an unusual start position. So that's one thing we do when I just have them I actually have them simulate the angles where they just finished their pitch, they manage to catch the ball, and they have to cover. Or they have to get to first, or they see they've got to cover first. And so maybe they've just landed in their follow through. So we kind of play around with that, but give them the purpose of why you're doing that, because it helps them frame that in. So that's the way I would handle running.
Great. Yeah. Through the magic of Google Earth, I'm looking right now, and our outfield pole to pole on the warning track is about 550 feet. So I was a little short on that. So,
okay. Okay, cool. So you want to bring it to about 100.
Yeah. Great.
Yes. So what other training myth?
Gadgets. Are there any particular gadgets? I know you and I in the past have talked about weighted balls, and we had a good discussion on that on the last podcast. But are there any particular, without naming them, are there any particular gadgets out there that you think are worthwhile?
Well, let me tell you how you could maybe look at all the gadgets that are out there and decide if they're right for you. Now, I have coaches calling me all the time with, did you hear of this? Or I should introduce you to these guys that have this. And when he tells me what the gadget does, I say, well, I'm that gadget. Like, here's a gadget you put on your rear hip and it teaches you how to create the stride. And I'm like, well, I'm the person that's what they hire me for. So here's the thing that you have to be careful of. First of all, if the person designing the gadget that's for the ankle, the hip, the elbow, the whatever, and there's gadgets for everything, if they don't have a precise sense of what that joint is supposed to do, you're going to be mistraining the pitching motion. So, for example, somebody told me the other day about something with the ankle, and it involves some kind of weight or whatever to help learn how to move off the rubber. Well, the ankle and the foot have to stay on the rubber so the hip can move sideways. So if you've got the ankle weighted down with something so that you do something different with it, well, it's going to destroy the whole motion, and the pitcher will be putting power instead of stability into a certain body part. So when you're looking at a gadget, you have to make sure that it is designed to appropriately teach some feel, which is, I think, the reason why these gadgets are designed. Secondly, if you're weighing down a part of the pitcher's motion on a muscle that is not meant to be weighed down the way you're weighing it down, then you're going to bring in other muscles to do it. So you're not really teaching them how to use the muscle to create that movement. I like that people are coming up with all these things for the stride. because the stride's important. In fact, I'll mention right now in my next podcast, we're going to be talking stride with Larry Owens, and I'm going to have videos and how I teach the stride because I get so many questions on it. But this has more gadgets than anything. Belts, weights, this, that. People don't understand how the body loads itself on one leg. It's kind of a strange thing, not to kinesiologists, but if you put something heavy on that back hip or do whatever, the pitcher is going to use other muscles in his leg, not his hip, to try to create the stride, and you're going to have a problem. So if you have a gadget that's intriguing you, look at what it's supposed to be training, then figure out, is it actually training that? And also, do you have a way where you could actually teach the body per his body how to feel it? When we're trying to teach a squat, we teach the motion, and then you put the weight on to make the motion, to load the motion, but you're not putting a weight on a certain part of the body. But that's my problem with the gadgets. See, there aren't a lot of people who understand what happens in the motion. I don't actually know why, because if you consult science, and we have such a distinct language, I mean, if it says north, it's north. If it says south, it's south. Why people think that, oh, no, it must mean west, I have no idea. But people do not understand. Yeah. And so if you don't understand it and you can't teach it just per the body, then buying a gadget could interrupt things. But here's what you want to do if you can't even go through those steps. Carefully look at some pictures, usually in their advertising, who are using it. And coaches, I always tell you this, you've got a great eye. If it looks strange, it is strange. If it looks weird, it is weird. And use your intuition and continue using it even if you purchase it. But that's my instruction on gadgets.
So I think the takeaway here is, hey, coaches, be the gadget if you can. Right?
I love that. Oh my God. That's fantastic. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. True. Very true. That's great. Oh, that's funny. Really funny. So anything else?
No, I think that does it for today. We've covered a lot of ground and a lot of great stuff. And like I tell everybody, always go back and listen to the podcast a second, a third, even a fourth time. And you'll always find something additional in there that's beneficial. So this has been a really good podcast. I've learned stuff. I've been scribbling notes, and I appreciate the time.
Well, I appreciate that. And Brent and David, thanks for sending in your questions. And David, I know that you had a question about the stride, and I'm dedicating the entire next podcast to that. So I'm hoping that we can, I will be the gadget on the next podcast.
Be the gadget.
Yes. And thank you so much for all your time. And I know you represent all the coaches in the country in the sense that they probably have the same similar questions as you. So thanks everybody for listening. And for more information about me, please visit my website at www.gymscience.com, and please follow Angel Borrelli Pitching on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you.